Hello. Today we're going to be looking at significance levels and interpreting uh, our significance tests. Now, a significance level is the decision level that we choose for our p-value. We also write this as alpha 0.05, or we can do alpha equals 0.01. That's the level at which we choose to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. And we'll see what that means in a minute. Now, statistical significance. If the p-value is as small or smaller than our alpha, we say that the data are statistically significant. Now, people use the word statistically significant all the time, and not everybody knows exactly what they're talking about when they use that word. What they're actually talking about is the p-value that we learned in our previous lesson. It has to be lower than our alpha level. So let's see what that means. Now, significant doesn't mean important. It happens that it's just not likely to happen by chance. We have another video to explain that in more detail. Now, what are good levels for alpha? So alpha of 0.05 is your standard alpha level. This is the common alpha level for psychology experiments, business. This is just the common significance level. However, if you're in this will give you a wrong result 5% of the time, which in the psychology world, that's really not that big of a deal. You just run the survey experiment again just to check, and it increases your chances of being correct. However, if you are working with at Medtronic, you don't want your heart devices to fail 5% of the time. If you're putting something in somebody's body, you want a much lower significance level. Sometimes 1%, and it could even be 0.001 and so on, depending on how certain you want to be sure of your value. Now, we'll talk more about this when we get into type 1 and type 2 errors, but type 0.01 is a fairly strict significance level. 0.05 is average, and a very loose one would be 0.1, so 10% of the time. Now there's two decisions that we have to make about the null hypothesis. We can either reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Those are our two options. It's just like when you're in court. If you're sitting on trial for murder, a jury will never prove you guilty or prove you innocent. They'll either prove you guilty or not guilty. They never prove you innocent. In this case, you never want to say that we accept the null hypothesis because we don't have enough evidence for that. We can either reject it or fail to reject it. Now, if you're going to state conclusions based on significant data, then the significance level should be stated before the data are produced. You want to check your alpha level before you start. Now, when we make an interpretation of a significance test, we want to include a few things. First, we either want to reject or fail to reject. We need to include a p-value and link it to our alpha level. And then we want to include an answer to the research question in the context. Hopefully this will make sense as we go through it. So write an interpretation for the paramedic example. Now for this, we got a p-value of 0.014. Now typically, we're going to start with an alpha level, and if they don't give it to us, let's keep a standard of 0.05. Now, since this is below the alpha of 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis. So let's start this out. So we can say we reject the null hypothesis because our p-value of 0.0145 is below our alpha equals 0.05. So that's one thing we need there. We need to reject it, have our p-value, and link it to our alpha level. Now we have to state what this means to us. So let's think about the problem again. We have our distribution. Now our sample was 6.48, and our previous knowledge was 6.7. So we set up this whole model assuming 6.7 is the true mean. But we'll only get a sample like this about 1% of the time if this is the true mean. So since this p-value is low, this is giving us evidence that we've actually reduced the mean response time. So uh, our last statement should be what we found here. So we have evidence that the paramedics improved their response time. All right, that's an interpretation. Hopefully that makes sense. Good luck.